And we should be live. Um, Hello, everyone. This is going to be a debate on the topic of AI art today. I'm joined by blearoyd, who made this video in response to me. You can find it in the description of this video, and I'll put it into the chat here. Do you want to introduce yourself, introduce your channel, let people know what you're about?
Um, okay, well, hello everyone, whoever is watching this. I'm an indie artist, have been for a couple of years now. I've yet to do anything, really professionally aside from a handful of commissions, but, trying to establish more of an online presence, hence the YouTube channel. So yeah, not a whole lot to say beyond that.
Yeah. All right, and so you had a number of points against me in your response. I've noted down at least the gist of most of them here. I think it would be perhaps a good place to start early on in your video and sort of repeated throughout. You bring up this call for regulating AI. You want a sort of regulated AI. So I suppose the first thing I'd be interested in is what specific sorts of regulations are you advocating?
Well, the biggest one, even going beyond, the whole discussion of AI art itself, the biggest problem I see with it currently is disinformation, not knowing what's real from what's not, etc. So, there needs to be better indicators in place, to indicate when something is heavily AI generated, because, like you had noted in your video that you were kind of under the impression that a lot of the controversy surrounding AI is competition, which I agree is not a sufficient reason to just do away with something. But I think another point that wasn't brought up at all was that of erasure, right? And that this could happen in two ways. One could be AI just polluting search results, and it may be even being prioritized over original artists, with which, thankfully we still have search optimization. I don't know if Google were to ever hand that over to an AI, that would probably be pretty bad. But, it is a concern how it kind of pollutes search results. The other way this could happen is if you do attach an artist's name to, say, an image or text or whatever, but without indicating that that is in fact AI generated, someone who's not familiar with that artist's body of work, they might look at that and think, yeah, that person made that, right? Even though it's AI generated. So that's also a problem.
Okay, so I can understand why it would be concerning, certainly, somebody making disinformation with AI. I don't think lying is a good thing. But more of the point when it comes to regulations is that, well, you're advocating that the government go in here and forcefully stop people from lying, forcefully control and monitor what people are allowed to do with what is essentially a denoising algorithm. So, like, what gives the government the right to do that?
Well, when the, I think some amount of regulation is necessary when it comes to, something potentially harmful. That's the reason why we end up with like asbestos and wall insulation, right? Which, obviously anything taken to an extreme is bad, right? Um, since I can tell that you're not a fan of the government, right? Or at least not government regulations. And, I can understand that because no one likes a totalitarian government. But to suggest that things just remain entirely unregulated, I don't think that's, I don't see that being a net positive for society.
Okay, so so you think that the thing which is justifying that the government is going in here and violating people's rights when it comes to something really harmful, or just in general, is that it would be a net positive to have that regulation as against a net negative. Would that be an accurate summary?
Yeah, I guess that's the simplest way to put it.
Okay, and one of the ways you put this in your video is that AI is moral if it promotes more human flourishing than it does suffering. So I'm curious what the standard of flourishing is. Like, what does it mean for a technology to promote more flourishing than suffering? How would I actually nitty gritty get out there and determine, okay, this produces this much flourishing and this much suffering? How would I do that?
Well, in the example of it being used in healthcare, like in your video, you had mentioned, potentially being used to find a cure for Alzheimer's. However that would be done, that's a good example of human flourishing, right? Getting rid of diseases through AI. Which, AI can still be used for artistic purposes. I'm not saying that it has to be entirely barred from any particular section of society, but those regulations still need to be in place to some degree.
So I would definitely agree that finding a cure for Alzheimer's, that's probably going to lead to a great deal of flourishing. But I don't know if I'm using the same sort of standard here. In fact, I know I'm definitely not, because we come to vastly different ethical conclusions.
Right.
What did you do in your head to identify, yes, Alzheimer's creates more flourishing than a cure for Alzheimer's would create more flourishing than the harm done by the AI? Because, there are certainly some people who think AI is some existential threat and it'll kill everybody. So they would come to a different conclusion there. So how did you, what does it mean for it to cause more flourishing? What is the standard of flourishing?
Well, I guess first of all, I would clarify that I personally do not have any concerns about, AI becoming super intelligent and all that and becoming this existential threat. I don't think that's a real thing, because it is a tool, and I don't think is comparable to human intellect. But I guess I'm wondering what the relevance of the specific definition is.
I could give maybe an example of, for instance, if I was to talk to a utilitarian, they would say something along the lines of, well, it has the greatest amount of happiness with the lowest amount of pain, the greatest amount of pleasure, lowest amount of pain. That's the best action to pick in any given circumstance. Would you agree with the utilitarian or adopt some other sort of theory?
Sorry, could you repeat that to me again?
So the utilitarian would say to this question, well, a technology is good and should be created and implemented and all this sort of stuff if it maximizes pleasure and minimizes pain. Maximize pleasure, minimize pain. That would be the utilitarian standard of whether or not we should allow this to go forth or regulate it out of existence. Would you agree with the utilitarian one? Because it sounds sort of like a utilitarian standard here with talking about flourishing and suffering. Are those just synonyms for pleasure and pain as I'm using them?
Well, I mean, it all comes down to balance, right? I mean, if you're maximizing your pleasure at the expense of someone else's pain, right, then that wouldn't be a good thing. So I guess it would depend on.
So specifically, the utilitarian would be
If,
for the greatest number of people. I missed out that part. So yeah, it wouldn't be sort of the hedonic view where it's just maximize your own pleasure and minimize your own pain. It would be, maybe even sacrifice yourself if that's going to create more happiness in general.
okay, I guess in that case, I would say utilitarian.
Okay. So there's a problem with this sort of theory, is that what makes someone happy, or have greater utility, or have the most flourishing, or whatever, that depends upon a standard of value. So a person in nature with no society around them is not going to get happy if they find a $5 bill on the ground. But if I was walking along and I found a $5 bill, I would get happy. I'm happy because I already have a certain set of values which says that money is good, that money can get me good things. Now, the utilitarian is supposed to be giving us a standard of value. They're supposed to be giving us this set of values, these things that we should be pursuing. But it relies upon already having a set of things that you just happen to pursue. So it's what is specifically called a parasitic ethics. That is, it relies on some prior ethical view before it can give you any advice. So it's sort of just null. That's my problem with this. Maximize flourishing, minimize suffering. It is, by necessity, a parasitic viewpoint.
Okay, so what would you say is the downside to placing regulation of any kind on AI or neural networks?
Well, I certainly wouldn't phrase it as, well, there's these downsides and these upsides and we've got to balance the concerns or anything like that. But I think the reason why you wouldn't want any kind of regulation is because it violates people's rights. I'm allowed to, it's my right, my computer, my property. If I want to run some software which removes noise from an image, which is what these AI image generators do, then I'm allowed to do that. It's my right to do that. And more fundamentally, nobody else has a right to stop me. They don't gain a right to stop me because some wackadoodle economist says that it would maximize the utils or whatever, right? It's my property. I'm allowed to denoise images all I want.
Okay, but then you wouldn't be allowed to claim that something or show something in such a way as if it isn't AI, even though it was AI generated.
I mean, yeah,
Because
that
that would be considered fraud, right?
it might be a sort of a moral or spiritual fraud, but it isn't legal fraud. Legal fraud would be theft by deception. So you could use AI to commit fraud. Like if I pretended to be like you, if I like copied your voice, cloned your face and did all this sort of stuff, and then started calling up your family members with this AI script, asking them for money, I'm committing fraud there. So fraud is specifically theft by deception. So I'm deceiving them into thinking that I'm you when I'm actually clearly not you, in order to get money out of them. Right? That would be fraud. But just lying on the internet or anywhere else is not fraud. It's lying, and lying is bad, right? But it's not fraud.
Okay. I mean, like to use Meta AI as an example, right? Because I've experimented with it a bit, and I've noticed that they, at least for the sake of covering their ass, right? They've started adding a little watermark in the corner, right? Say if you generate an image with it, right? They'll have that little watermark. And that to me seems like a perfectly reasonable thing to implement, right?
I mean, if the company wants to
The
implement
regulation saying these things.
Oh, no, not regulation. Definitely
Sorry?
not. Because what that regulation would involve is, let's say I download Stable Diffusion on my computer and I want to generate images without a watermark which says Liquid Zulu made this image. Then you'd want to have, in the extreme case, the government come break down my door, and if I resist strong enough, shoot me in the head or throw me in a cage. No, that's definitely not justified because I didn't want to put a watermark on an image.
Okay. I guess what I'm wondering is why we're jumping to the extreme.
Because that's the practical
case.
implication of it, right? It might be all well and good to, pretend these crimes is what they are all fine because most people go along with them. But we have to consider the case of, well, what if somebody doesn't go along with them? What if somebody disobeys the mobster? He's going to get whacked, is what's going to happen. So I think it's important to really highlight that in every discussion like this. We can't just, people say like, oh, well, we're just going to regulate the economy. We're just going to change how the economy operates. We're not going to go after people. We're not totalitarians. We're just going to meddle with the economy. What they forget is the practical implication of that, because the economy is just people acting, is changing how people act. And you need a way to make sure that they follow your orders, which is you'll shoot them in the head if they say no.
Right.
Like, I'm curious if you
I think there's
would be willing to carry out these orders. Like if I was sitting in my living room generating images and I didn't add the watermark, would you be willing to come and kick my door down and shoot me in the head?
Well, I don't think we're advocating murder here.
But what happens if I disobey the police? Like, are they just going to go, oh, well, shucks, he disobeyed us hard enough. I guess we're going to go along our way. No, they're going to kill me or throw me in a cage.
Well, I think there's two different contexts for this, right? There's what's done on an individual level, and then there's what's done by conglomerates, corporations, right? Like I'm not so concerned about what individuals are doing as much as how are these tools being used by corporations, right? Like even there's like there's these free open source AI tools out there. As much as I may not like them, like most of those are crowdfunded anyways. So like that's just not really my focus. I'm more concerned about what are these large corporations doing?
Right, but
with these tools.
I mean,
right.
As Carla Ortiz, I was watching the video earlier today, as Carla Ortiz acknowledges, corporations are just a group of individuals. So if you are doing something against a corporation, you're ordering a corporation what to do, you're still ordering a bunch of individuals what to do. And if that corporation says no, well, their life work is going to get taken away from them, and perhaps even shot in the head or put in a cage.
Well, I mean, if I mean, if what they're doing is fraudulent to the level of, like, I'm just not sure why we're jumping straight to like execution level crimes.
Well, I explained why. It's because that is the practical implication of what you are advocating. The system you're advocating is either you follow these rules, or we'll do this. And if you don't do that, then or we'll do this, and yada 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 yada. The final one in the end is, or we'll shoot you in the face. Right? I think it's very important to note that after this whole chain of, okay, yeah, we're going to come knocking on your door, we're going to send you some strongly worded letters, like all of that stuff is, who cares? But the final step of it, the real reason why people follow this is because that final step is, or we'll shoot you in the face. And I think that's a very important step to be focusing on, because that's the most egregious one. It's not that egregious to send someone a strongly worded letter that you're very disappointed, that you're some important judge and you're very disappointed that they're making images without watermarks on them.
That's where things like financial harm come in, right? We're saying if you do X, Y, Z, you can be sued for it, right?
Yeah, right. But sued by the government. It's not like a proper suit where I steal your money and you bring me to court to get your money back. It's nothing like that. It's, you didn't put the watermark on the image, the government approved watermark. They have to put on all your images now. So we're going to take a bunch of money from you. And if you refuse to give them the money, yada, 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 eventually, we're going to shoot you in the face.
Okay.
Like that's always the final step, is if you resist hard enough, we will shoot you in the face.
Okay, well, to use a different example, Big Pharma, right, is rather controversial to a lot of people, but the things they produce at least need to be FDA approved. I guess, well, here in Canada, I think it's just called Health Canada. But point being, there's regulations in place, right? You legally are required to put ingredients and efficacy or, amount. Things need to be labeled, right?
Yeah, so I think that's a massive crime.
Do you see anything wrong with that kind of regulation?
Yeah, that's horrible. Like, it's the government coming in and telling people, hey, you're not allowed to sell this substance until we approve of it. How about, they get the hell away from me and let me buy and sell what I want. Right? If I want to sell cocaine, that should be my right. If I want to buy Adderall, that's my right. Okay, more specifically, it's nobody's right to stop that from happening. Nobody has a right to come up to John and Sally, who are trading cocaine with each other, and say, you're not allowed to do that. The FDA didn't say so. Diddums, who cares, right? Who cares that the FDA didn't say so? What it really actually means then, again, is, hey, John and Sally, if you don't do these things by my rules, I'm going to shoot you both in the face. Right? Again, that's what all these government rules are. It's do this, or ... or I'll shoot you in the face.
So, I mean, earlier we were just talking about net positives, right? For society. If someone is selling a drug, or say a large company is doing this, the individual doesn't have, is not able to effectively, guess or estimate what the efficacy of the drug is. They're just trusting that they're being given what they're supposed to be given, right? That's why the regulation is there.
Well, you don't need regulations for this. So you can get this with just purely naturalistic understanding of fraud, right? If I sell you a pill that says it'll make your cock grow to 12 inches, of course I wouldn't need such a thing. If I hypothetically was manufacturing such pills and I actually didn't do that, that would be a crime. I would be defrauding people.
Yeah, it would be fraud.
Right. So there's no need for a regulation here.
But it prevents that from happening in the first place, right?
How? What?
Or minimizes it, at least.
So your opinion is that if there's a law against murder, we need an extra law against murder whilst wearing a blue shirt, because then that's going to prevent the murders from happening. At least when people are wearing blue shirts, because murderers, they don't want to break the law. This is silly.
I'm saying regulation is good when it minimizes harmful activity, right?
Right, but your standard of harmful activity is this utilitarian standard, which we already established is a parasitic ethics. So it doesn't stand.
Well, were there other parts of your video or my video that you wanted to discuss?
Sure.
Just because we're already half an hour in.
So you discuss fan art. My argument that fan art is basically always a violation of IP. You bring up the concept of fair use. I have a number of problems with that. But I suppose the first one is just I checked with a lawyer friend of mine earlier today, and he confirmed, no, fair use does not exempt you because you just really liked making Spider-Man art. This is why when the Marvel films were all popping off with the Avengers and whatnot, that DC didn't come in and just make some fan art movies of the Avengers, right? They'd be sued into oblivion if they tried to do that. Technically, every single time you go into some sort of convention and there's a guy doodling Spider-Man, he is violating copyright right there when he's doing that. That is a violation of intellectual property. So the upshot of that is either you guys, the general anti-AI artist conglomerate, either you've got to reject fan art, and then you can have these IP arguments against AI, or you're fine with fan art, but then you can't have any of these IP arguments where you guys keep talking about oh no, but Stable Diffusion, it violates IP, because then you've got to get rid of fan art. So which one do you pick? Do you want fan art to be fine and AI to be fine, or both to be not fine?
Right. Well, see, there's uses of AI that fall under fair use and some that don't. Right. So, just first of all, to talk about fan art, there's a mutual understanding that these fan art communities, they can do whatever they're gonna do with these IPs, provided that they don't get too big, is kind of the agreement, right? Like if I were to...
But to be clear, it's not an agreement, it's just Marvel doesn't care about them until they get too big.
Yeah, exactly. So like if I were to start selling, I did that one Freerin video that everyone liked, which is fair use, by the way, because it's commentary. But if I were to have my whole channel revolve around that IP and I started selling merch and all this, then yeah, that makes me a target. And I would say that's on me because I got carried away with an IP that didn't belong to me to begin with.
So when
no one is making fan art for the sake of there's a little bit of profit there, here and there, but generally it's just for the sake of sharing things, right? If you want, technically you can make fan art using AI, right? Even though you could say that the AI stuff generated using or based off of Kim Jong-il's style, right? Depending on what the intent was behind that, you could theoretically call that fan art. But
so when you're using these copyright arguments, oh, it's in violation of this copyright, you aren't making any moral case there. You're just kind of dispassionately saying, Well, you see, these images that were scraped, that actually happens to violate copyright. But of course, I don't really care about this, because I'm just dispassionate. I'm not making any moral argument here.
Sorry, could you expand on
So,
that?
like, because you're saying that it's fine to violate IP in the case of fan art, it's just up until the point, it's just sometimes risky, because you might get caught, but you think it's fine to do it. So that throws away it's violating copyright as a moral condemnation. So when you're bringing up things like, well, all of these images in Leon, they were taken, they're a violation of copyright. You're not condemning it at all with that sentence. You're as dispassionately relaying some legal tidbit.
Right. I mean, I see your point.
So what do you think of that point? Like, it definitely seems like when somebody says, hey, but that's violating copyright, that they're making a moral condemnation there. But if they're to make that moral condemnation, they should also condemn fan art. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm saying is that, there's some uses of AI that are, more acceptable than others, right? Like when I, say when no one cares if, or no artist cares if their work is used for, say, educational purposes, right? Like, I use my own drawings in my videos all the time, right? Because I want to be able to teach people things. And I think kind of the reaction that, a lot of we're seeing from the art community is in response to, um, these tools that kind of take from when you generate things with an AI, you're not really showing any respect towards those art forms that you're pulling from, right? Because you're not learning how to paint or draw or write. You're learning how to use a generator, right? And you can disagree with that, but I'm just trying to put it in perspective.
Right, but so then the argument
for you
isn't, well, hey, this is violating copyright, and violating copyright is bad. It's something else, and of course, my argument for what it actually is, down at the core, is this thing might outcompete me, and I'm scared of that, so I want the government to destroy it. Right, that's definitely the case with, let's see here, Istabrak, Sam Yang, and Louis Van Barl. They are all just afraid of competition, so they want to destroy this thing. It's the case with Duchess Celestia. She's explicit on this. I quote her in the video extensively. That's what it is at the core, because, of course, artists have never really broadly...
Yeah. Well,
obviously, some big artists have cared about IP before, but broadly speaking, they don't really care until it comes to something where they get a little bit uncomfy about it, and then they want to use the hammer of the state to destroy it. And I think that's deeply dishonest of them.
Hmm. Well, I do recall kind of pushing back against, what was it, Duchess Celestia's quotes in my response video.
Mm-hmm.
Generally saying that, like, yeah, I think people should be able to use image generators for things if they wish. Just don't be plopping a single artist's name in there and then be selling it, right?
Right, but I would definitely say that you are
which
the minority.
which wouldn't be an issue if it were trained on the public domain.
Right, and I am asserting that you are in a fraction of a minority of the anti-AI crowd with this. I mean, these people that I'm listing, and that I've listed in the video, they're getting, like, the broad majority of the views of the entire subject. And all the people in the comments are agreeing with them. It is competition that they're against. And if you watch enough of these videos like I did, they'll tell you to your face that it's competition is what they're afraid of.
Yeah, I mean, I can sympathize with, I'm sure a lot of those comments are from younger artists who I can sympathize with because, they don't really have, they're maybe not at a professional level. They don't have any of that prior experience, and they see these tools and think, oh wow, like I can't compete with that, right? I can't even, you know, these like a lot of AI images to me aren't, I personally don't find them all that impressive as someone who already has that skill set, right? And so that's where I think a lot of this backlash is coming from is is that yes, I do think there is a fear of competition there. That's definitely a big part of it.
I mean, like, all of the people I cite in my video on that point, and in the video in general, they're all professional artists, right? Like, this is, I think I used one screenshot of just a random YouTube comment I saw, which concretized the attitude quite well. But the rest of it is quotes from famous and professional artists. And they're worried about competition. They're worried about losing their jobs. And I think that is a deeply, deeply evil attitude for them to have. Like, they want me.
Why is that?
They want me to suffer and everybody else to suffer so that they can stagnate, so that they don't have to innovate, so that they don't have to improve. That is horrible.
Well, I would agree with that interpretation of it. But at the core of it, no one enjoys being replaced, right? Just like, if we go back to the original Luddites with the printing press and all that, I can sympathize with, that mindset of like, oh, I've been building up this, skill set for the majority of my life, and now suddenly here's this thing that can potentially replace me, right? And if you're not giving people sufficient places to go, if you're displacing enough people without giving them, sufficient options, then yeah, there's going to be a lot of backlash.
Sure, they
Now,
might.
There is more.
I mean, they may get upset
there is
about
more.
this. I don't think they should get upset about this. I mean, my job is convincing people to become anarcho-capitalists. If somebody made an AI that was so good at this that everybody became an anarcho-capitalist and I no longer was able to make videos, I would be ecstatic about that. I'd be overjoyed. So I don't think it is true that nobody enjoys it being replaced. And it's not just about not enjoying it. Like, that's one thing. Sure, they get a little bit salty that they're getting out-competed. Whatever. It's that they want to then translate that saltiness into, we need to bring the government into this and violently prevent people from competing with us. If they try and compete with us hard enough, I want somebody to shoot them in the head. That is what they're advocating. That is evil.
Well, it seems to me like your fear of extreme government intervention is making you push more in favor of tech companies having zero democratic oversight.
Yes.
In the things they produce and how they're used.
Yes, that's correct.
Is that?
Yeah,
okay.
I definitely, 100%, I hate democracy. And I want there to be zero democratic oversight of any person, company, uh, whatever, right? Whatever organization you've got. I don't want there to be some bureaucrat sitting there and telling you how you're supposed to run it.
So,
Yeah.
so companies can just like dump chemicals in drinking water, and that's
If they dump
okay
it,
because it's all part of business.
well, if they're dumping it in drinking water, and they're poisoning someone, then that someone can take. And by the way, this already happened back before the progressive era. There'd be a factory pumping out smoke, and they would dirty some little old lady's laundry when she hung out to dry, and she would sue the factory, get an injunction against them. They'd pay to replace her clothes, and they would have to put a filter in the chimney to stop smoke from coming out. Then this thing called the EPA comes along, and it says, no, the factories are allowed to pollute up to a certain amount. So they give them pollution licenses. The justification for this was, well, we're America, and we want to be better than Britain. To be better than Britain, we've got to get a bunch of industry in here. So the government came in and got rid of all of these tort lawsuits, right? We had already solved this with the free market. This is not something where we need some government solution to a government problem. Just get rid of the initial government problem. And the way to solve that factory example wouldn't be, let's all take a vote on how much we think the factory should be allowed to pollute, right?
So a free market solves everything is
not everything,
what you're arguing?
but it's not. But the government solves nothing unless your goal is to kill a bunch of people and cause massive amounts of suffering. If that's your goal, then yeah, it's state of government. Go ahead. But I don't want any part of it.
Well, I guess on that note, something I did want to bring up, just because I'm aware that Silicon Valley likes to really pride itself on being fully independent, anti-government, right? I have a list here of Elon Musk's companies and how much money they've received in subsidies, if you're interested in that.
I don't need the whole list. I do know that his companies do take subsidies, but they, at least as far as I'm aware, they have never petitioned for a subsidy. They've never gone to the government and said, hey, we need this new subsidy on XYZ. If they have done that, then that's very evil. And I'm against that. Very opposed to that. As far as I'm aware, he's just accepting subsidies. Now, I don't think it's criminal necessarily to just accept subsidies. Because if you think about how much tax that guy's paying in, getting some of it back from the government, that's not untoward at all.
Well, and yet it's usually the most wealthy that receive the most tax cuts, right?
No. The wealthy are taxed way more than anybody else.
Ideally, yes.
Currently.
So you're saying that someone like Elon Musk would be paying more in taxes than whatever he receives in subsidies?
I don't know the specific accounting. I'm not his accountant. But I would say that the legal theory position on this is that you would be allowed to take twice what was taken from you. So this is restitution plus retribution. So if the government stole, let's say, $1 billion from him, he'd be allowed to take that billion back in subsidies and take an additional $1 billion. So I doubt that he's getting that much subsidies. Maybe he is, and he's like some sort of a leech. But that would be like a specific case that would need to be made.
I can let's see. SpaceX $2.89 billion contract with NASA, April 2021. SpaceX $653 million contract with U.S. Air Force in 2020.
To be clear, these
Tesla
are
accepts payroll
slightly.
benefits.
To be clear, these are slightly different than subsidies. Like, he's not just getting free money from the government for doing what he was already doing. He is doing a job for the government, and they're paying him for it. Now, I don't think he should be working for the government. I definitely think that's a horrible thing to do. He should make like Atlas and Shrug, but it's not the same as a subsidy, to be clear.
Okay. What about payroll benefits from federal government's $600 billion pandemic stimulus?
Right, so that is, I assume, the thing in the US where everybody got a check, right? That is individual people getting some of their tax money back. So that has really nothing to do with Elon, unless you're meaning some other government stimulus from that era, which I'm not aware of.
Okay, fair enough. Well, then the rest are New York State, the Solar City. These have to do with more with like individual states or countries.
Mhm.
Sorry, maybe I've kind of derailed things a little bit. I'm just trying to think
No
of
worries.
what else I want to cover before, our time is up here.
I suppose we could go into sort of the bar of acceptable AI usage. This is something you've touched on in your video and in this debate. That there is, I mean, you cited in your video that you use manga filters, which were like done by AI. So you're clearly fine with some level of AI usage of this denoising technology is what it is. Why that amount and not anymore? Like, where is that bar and why is it there?
Well, for one, the manga filter example I had used, it was just as an example. I don't actually. That was an experiment of mine. I haven't actually used it in any of my work. I personally have no use for generative AI of any kind.
I mean, you still did use it,
but others may have. Yeah, I did experiment with it.
right? So that's fine, and presumably you're not fine with the LoRa, which targeted Sam Yang's work, where it was specifically trained to look like Sam Yang's work. Would I be correct in that?
Yeah.
All right.
I'd say I'm not okay with that.
So where in between these extremes does it turn from fine usage of this technology to bad usage of this technology? Where is that point?
Well, I think there's different things to consider when it's non-commercial versus commercial usage.
Okay,
because...
Sorry. So, presumably, I'm going to guess here, you're less okay with it if it's commercial.
Yes.
Why does making a profit make it evil?
Well, and it depends on how that profit is being made. Like I mentioned in my video, right, that we have fair use to help, negate, people trying to leverage, creative copyright in their favor and that sort of thing, right? So, something like, and actually I'll bring up the example I had used in my video, which was from a Stable Diffusion tutorial. And I'll just read out the prompts here. So like GTA, Jim Halpert, John Krasinski, profile picture, Greg Rukowski, dynamic pose, Thomas Kincaid, Alphonse Mucha, Norman Rockwell, fantasy lut, etc. So something like that, right? As much as I may not like it, you could sell that and still have a case for yourself, right? Because there's a lot of different elements in there. It's not just one particular artist or two, right? If you're specifically targeting a certain artist using their own name and profiting off it, then you can be sued for that.
Right, but then you're just appealing to the positivist legal system, which, I mean, if you're going to be a legal positivist, boy, have I got some hypotheticals to throw your way. I mean, are you of the stance that, like, hey, well, a judge would let you sue someone for this, so therefore that's a perfectly fine law, and I'm in favor of it?
Well, I'm saying that it has to be diluted, right? If you're using people's styles, living artists in particular.
But how much does it have to be diluted? And why do you have to dilute for living artists? Apparently you also do for Kim Jong-il, even though he's not a living artist.
Right. Well, I don't agree with, as I said in my video, like Disney lengthening the time constraint on the public domain, right?
So you think it should be a shorter time? But how much shorter, right?
Like, I understand what you're saying in terms of, arbitrary measurements on things. I'm simply in favor of people not being exploited, right? I don't like worker exploitation. So like, as an hypothetical, say there's no time constraint. Say it's just as soon as an artist kicks the bucket, now their work is public domain. Would there be any problem with that?
The problem would be that it wasn't public domain before. Like, I'm completely against IP.
That is not fair.
It's not fair because them coming up with an idea does not imply that I'm not allowed to use that same idea. Right? Like, IP,
yes, but in this case, we're not just
farce.
talking about we're not just talking about an idea. We're talking about something that's been built up over the course of decades.
So it's a very complex idea. Well done to them, but that does not imply that they get to control how I use my own damn property. Like, here's an example. Like, if you and your neighbor, you have identical stone quarries on your property. Your neighbor, he digs up some stone and he carves a statue into it. Do you think that you'd be in some way wronging him by going over and seeing his statue and then carving an identical one with your own stone out of your own quarry? Do you think you'd be wronging him by doing that?
Well, I mean, I think you could make the case that there is an educational use in there, because at least at the very least in that instance, this person is learning how to chisel stone.
Well,
right.
Let's say you both try and sell it.
So there's
right. But would you then be wronging him if you also tried to sell the identical statue that you made with your own stone on your own property?
I suppose in that instance, no.
Okay, well, then you're against intellectual property. Because the intellectual property believer would say, yes, you are wronging him because you stole his idea. So, are you going to be consistent in this anti-IP stance? And say that it's fine for anybody to take any idea whatever, because it certainly took a lot of effort and knowledge
I mean,
to make the statue in the first place.
I mean, I agree with you that IP has a lot of problems. I guess my question to you would be, what does this copyright-free world look like for creatives? Like, what replaces it?
I mean, they can still be creative all they want. Every single one of my videos is licensed under Creative Commons, and if you scroll to the bottom of my description, I get rid of the attribution requirement, and many people have re-uploaded my content in different places before, and I have not shed a single tear about it. I really don't care. I even sell some intellectual content, and it's very easy for people to get it for free, but people, they understand that it doesn't get made, it doesn't get paid for, so they're willing to pay for it. Like, I'm not out here trying to force people to not reproduce my content. I just ask that they send some money back my way if they want to do that. Like, it's not a complex thing. It's IP is a horrible, horrible, horrible thing. I would recommend.
But you do include a watermark in your videos.
Yeah, I do. Because if it gets reproduced, I want to be able to say, "Hey, I made that." That's not IP at all. Right? IP would be preventing other people from making it. I'm not doing that.
Right. So you'll
also notice that in my AI art video, I do what no other fucking YouTuber ever has done, and I cite all my B-roll. Right? Name another person who's ever done that.
Yeah, it is rather rare.
So, like, I'm not out here saying that plagiarism is good, plagiarism is fine, anything like that. I'm saying that it's evil to violently prevent people from copying ideas. That is evil.
Right.
I don't think you can own an idea.
Understand. Sorry?
Because I don't think you can own an idea. Right? An idea is, let's say it's like a certain typewriter where it's got a better typing mechanism. What the IP person is saying there is that they own the form of this typewriter. They own the concept of that typewriter. But concepts aren't actually out there. They don't actually exist in nature. Right? I'm not a Platonist. I'm an Aristotelian. An objectivist specifically. You can own concrete things, specific items, because you can have conflicts over them. But you can't have conflicts over concepts, because concepts aren't really out there. They're only in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand where you're coming from. But I guess just to go back to what I was saying about, if we do away with copyright, then, I guess essentially we're going back to or we're only relying on things like crowdfunding to produce things, I guess, or to help fund creatives, which, I could get behind if there were some sort of cultural reset, right? Like everything starts from zero.
Well, there would have to be a cultural reset specifically for you to have a zero IP world, right? Like, the culture is going to have to change for that to happen.
It would be really easy for Disney to just crowdfund the things they make, but statistically, how many YouTubers do you think can survive off donations?
Well, I would say most of them, because AdSense is for generally a minority of any given YouTuber's income. Like, I'm friends with some far larger YouTubers than me, and they're all making most of their money off of sponsorships, not YouTube AdSense. Right? And sponsorships, you don't need any IP for a sponsorship. Right? The fucking Raid Shadow Legends isn't going to give a shit if that video gets reposted by other people. They're going to love that.
Right. I mean, it's a genuine question, because I'm not large enough yet for any of that. So
once you get to a certain stage, the sponsorships kick in. I haven't had any sponsorships. I think I was contacted by a few gambling sites, but I declined because I can't imagine that I would hit any sort of margin to be worth it for them. So it would be a waste of everybody's time. And also I don't want to advertise gambling. Um, but yeah, I'm not big enough for that to be a thing. But still, I would say a minority of my income has come from YouTube AdSense. It's generally a minority. It's not a majority.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would still have some issues in terms of doing away with copyright entirely, because I think a lot of the allure for creatives in terms of copyright is that um, even an individual would be in a position to go after like a conglomerate, as so long as the case of plagiarism is obvious enough. Right. So like say if I were to pitch a show, ideas, characters to a studio, and they say, "Oh, sorry, we're not actually interested," and then they turn around and they reproduce that
I think that would
to
be
a
bad of
T, or
them.
at least as close to.
Like that would be an immoral thing for them to do. I definitely agree, and you'd be perfectly within your rights to have recorded your meeting and be like, "Hey, if you like this new character that's coming out, I'm actually the guy who came up with it. So you're gonna have to go to me if you want the true story." And you can have competition with them, right? They wouldn't have an IP over it, so you could reproduce their movie, but it's author approved, right?
Okay, but with what resources? That's why I went to the studio, right?
AI, right?
I don't have the resources to do that. Well, supposedly.
It would certainly make it a lot cheaper. But in any case, you could say like, hey, you could crowdfund it. They've spent all this money on marketing to get this new character out there. You say, like, hey, I'm actually the guy who came up with this, and you know, everybody got really pissed off about that the ending they did for that character, and they didn't like it. I can write a way better one if you guys crowdfund it. Someone in the chat mentioned, and I was going to mention before, Unique Anemosaurus has a video on like how the world without IP would work, and I agree with him. I cite his video in my video on IP, and I think it would be a much better world.
Right. Well, I'll give that video a watch. If just need to remind myself, because yeah, it is a topic that interests me. But like, let's say, okay, it's like for example, I remember during your intro or somewhere at the beginning of your video, you used a brief clip of H Bomber Guy's video, the whole James Somerton thing, right? So I assume you're, familiar with all of that. He was, plagiarizing people's work for years in his video, and H Bomber Guy called him out, and he was effectively chased off the platform, right? So
I'm
that would be an
familiar.
example of.
I am only vaguely familiar with that case, to be clear. I just remember that when I was editing that part, it was like a big thing at the time, like a case of plagiarism.
Yeah.
So I just used it for blearoyd. I haven't watched his like video on it though.
Okay. So, but I mean, yeah, that's the gist of it, of what happened, right? Now, so that would be an example of like public.
It's just shaming, right? It's
public
it's,
retribution.
Yeah,
whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it's this guy's mean, and you shouldn't.
But the reason
watch him.
Yeah, but the reason that worked was, well, there's two reasons for it. One is that James Somerton is an individual and not a conglomerate. The other reason being that H Bomber Guy has like, what, 2 million subscribers, right? So yeah, it's very easy for him to bring attention to something like that, right?
Sure, and just
whereas
get more subscribers, then you can do the same.
Yeah, but it's not exactly easy to develop such a large following.
Definitely
like
not
that.
Yeah, I agree. Like it's
It
fundamentally
requires years.
right, but fundamentally
So
it's like
I guess my
it's not like my problem if somebody's able to get away with plagiarism. Uh, yeah, if you can demonstrate to everybody that they're doing plagiarism, and like people decide that they're not willing to deal with that type of thing, great, go ahead, whatever. But like it doesn't address the legal point that well, it just simply isn't possible to own an idea, and it's like you're worried about like the small individual person who can't call out someone for plagiarism as easily. Well, I mean, let's say if somebody just ripped all of your videos right now and re-uploaded them somewhere. Like, do you have the means to be suing them, bringing them to court? Like, I would guess not. Maybe you're like secretly wealthy. That's going to be like hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that lawsuit. Like, I certainly wouldn't have the means to do that.
I've never had to take someone to court before, so I don't know the whole process of it. But I kind of what I was saying before, in that why I think a lot of creatives are still defensive of copyright is because they feel as though, so long as the case is obvious enough, you don't need a lengthy legal battle or an expensive lawyer to plead your case, right?
Then I'd question why it is that like every artist you might want to commission, before you send the money, they're not going to give you like the final full quality artwork. They're going to watermark it. They're going to send like a low res version, because they already understand. Like, have you ever seen Marvel sending out a low res version of a Marvel movie? No, they wouldn't do that because they know that they can use copyright, and the small artist knows that they can't. Right? The small artist knows that if I commission them for $100 to do something, and they send the full version, and I just never pay up, they know that they have zero recourse. They're not going to be able to afford the legal battle, and it just wouldn't be worth it for the $100 that they'd get out of me.
Yeah, I mean, as a commissioner, or as someone who's accepted commissions, I do the same thing, right? You give them a low res.
Right, because you know that you can't actually DMC anyone, because you can't afford the lawyer.
Right.
So you're already operating as if there is no IP, because effectively there isn't for you. IP, as with any monopoly grant, it's favoring the big guy over the little guy. I think that's bad.
Yeah. Well, and I'm in agreement with you on that. So I think for the sake of maybe meeting in the middle, I feel like you are very defensive of tech companies, which I view as this force that kind of typically extracts as much wealth as possible from individuals in order to maximize their own gain.
Well, so I think that's a very Marxian understanding of capitalism. These big businesses, bigness isn't the problem. It's when a big business engages in criminal activities like monopolization, that's the problem. Being big and wealthy under capitalism, if it's a true free market, it requires you to produce the best projects, to best serve your customers. That is not exploitation of anybody.
Well, like in your video, you seem to be also under the impression that this this perception of big tech just kind of fell out of the sky. Like people are just making a bunch of random guesses as to what their intentions are with AI technology, right? But
To be clear,
meanwhile,
I
they're
don't.
making continual changes to their TOS. All these platforms are in such a way that's not obvious. Um, you have social media giving people addictions and eating disorders, and I mean, insurance companies using surveillance data to increase their premiums, etc. So, they have a track record of abusing their power and abusing, the technology at their disposal. So, I guess I just want to point out that, like, there is very real reason for people to push back against this kind of technology because there's concern over how it's going to be used and for what purpose. Right?
So to be clear, I actually think worse of them than that. I think that I don't think they're just earnestly guessing at what the intentions of the tech companies could be. I think that they are just trying to set up a big smokescreen to hide the fact that they're worried about their job being lost because this technology is better than them.
Well, I would have to disagree with you on that. I do think that's part of it, but there is a much larger umbrella to this than just job loss.
Well, I mean, like, this is the thing that I have inducted and abstracted from watching over 100 videos on the topic from these artists, some of them very long discussions, and I have in my video included numerous quotes of them directly saying that, and none of their other arguments stand up to any sort of scrutiny. Like they keep going back and forth on all of them, because this is their true motivation. That's the one thing they stick clear to. That's the one thing they hold on to through all of their wishy-washiness and left and righting. They hold on to, and it's really evil because the people are profiting. That's the thing that they hold on to. It's the Marxism, it's the protectionism, it's the altruism.
Okay, I mean, I could say that maybe I'm in the minority in that I'm a little more nuanced in my stance towards AI. But I mean, I can really only speak for myself, right? I attempted to speak for all artists in my response video, which I assume you've watched all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But, I can really only speak for myself. I don't know what's going on in the heads of all these other artists, but, there is a lot of shared concerns. Which I actually did just now that it's on my mind, I did want to bring up the disabled argument that you had made in your video, and just point out that it's essentially a stalemate because while I can't argue that there aren't disabled people who I'm sure would find AI tools useful, there's also plenty of disabled people who end up in creative careers because they can't work a manual labor job or they can't work a regular 9 to 5, and who share all of those same concerns that the rest of the art community does.
Right, but
so that was
on the one side, it's people like my friend Necro. He's the example I brought up, the cerebral palsy guy. He cramps all up. He can't draw or write or anything sometimes. He told me straight up that he uses AI to ideate sometimes. And
Right.
the anti-AI crowd would want someone to go in there, kick him off his wheelchair, and shoot him in the head. Like, I think that's a very horrible thing to do. So he wants AI
Well, but,
so
but,
that
that-
he
but
can
that's not that's not
so that he can create and be productive, whereas the anti-AI disabled people, they want to kill AI so they don't have to improve any further, so they can just remain stagnant because they can't do anything else. There's a very clear difference there, and I think Necro is a far greater paradigm of what should be aspired to than the others.
right. Well, and that's not what I've been advocating. I'm advocating regulation. I'm not saying
Right, but the practical
no. I'm
implication
not
of
saying
regulation.
no one can use it for like ideation. That at least makes sense, right? Oh, I want to generate like a rough draft of a script and edit that or something. Like, okay, fair enough,
Right,
right?
but then you get then you complain when it becomes a commercial thing, when someone is profiting off of the AI image generation. But the government, they get a law which says anybody profiting off of AI image generation can be shot in the head, and very quickly they're going to stretch that definition as far as they want to. Like, you're saying that it was very, very. You could only produce this piece of art because you did the ideation. You're profiting in the chamber, right?
I mean, I still think there's a different treatment towards conglomerates and individuals. Whereas you kind of always jump to the individual case of
Because
we're attacking people
conglomerates
directly.
aren't the entity. There is no man out there. There is no corporation out there that you can feel and touch and look at. They're only individual men. All there is.
Okay, well, we're over the time limit now. I don't know if maybe we can cover one more talking point. If there was anything you wanted to add.
I pretty much covered everything. So we can leave it there if you want.
Okay, I guess the one more thing that I wanted to bring up is that you talk about the skill required in using AI tools, which is something I disagreed with. And I guess I was wondering I wanted to hear from you directly, I guess, what you think it is that makes the use of AI tools very skillful.
Well, for instance, I've only dabbled in AI image generators, like those Discord bots or Grok or whatever. I've never gotten anything compelling out of them. I have seen what it takes to get something compelling out of them. It involves a lot of generate an image, photo bash it together, do image to image, do some in-painting, do yada 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 for hours on end, and I do not have the patience for such things. That's a lot of time and effort, and I think specifically what you said in your video was that I had two contradictory claims, which is that AI art saves so much time and effort, and that AI art requires so much time and effort. So that's
Right.
just not a contradiction. AI image generation is indeed a labor-saving technology. It saves a lot of labor, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't still take a lot of labor to make a compelling artwork with it. So I suppose the analogy here would be, if you're plowing a field by hand, that's a hell of a lot more work than plowing it with horses, right? Those horses are a great labor-saving technology, but that doesn't mean that it's trivial to plow a field with horses. It's a lot more trivial than it is to do it with hands, but it's not trivial. And I would say that it's the same for AI art, because it's not type a prompt, get final image for anything remotely complex. The more artistic it is, the more control that somebody is leveraging, the further away it is from type a prompt, get an image. And Shadiversity has demonstrated this numerous times.
Right. Well, so I think you're equating time spent to skill or overall execution. Is that accurate?
I'm not a believer in the labor theory of art or anything. The standard I'm using here is specifically how much control that for an aesthetic judgment, that is, how much control are they exercising over the final image. That's what I really care about. But I believe I probably did say in the video, can't remember, that it does take a lot of time and effort to make the video up. That might have been a paraphrase from you. I don't know. It sounds like something I could have said. Now, it is true that it does take a lot of time and effort to get a compelling piece out of an AI. Like, you got to keep going in over and over and over again, iterating over and over and over again to get it just right. So I would say it is true.
So, like, if I were to say I were using something like, doesn't really matter, Mid-Journey, I were to generate an image with a handful of prompts and then generate another image with similar subject matter with a bunch of additional prompts and number values and brackets and all that, and I place them side by side, do you believe you'd be able to tell the two of them apart?
So like a one made with Mid-Journey, one made with like more text in the Mid-Journey prompt? Is that what you said?
Yeah, more. Yeah, because there's like the brackets for that you use to weight prompts differently. And all those sliders as well that like Shadiversity was using. So basically, an image with as minimal prompts as possible, and then another image with all kinds of different prompts and number values.
I mean, maybe I could tell them apart. I don't know.
Similar subject matter.
I'm not an artist, of course, but I could give you an artistic evaluation of both of them. Now, whether that is reflective of how much you put into the prompt, that's a different question. You're more likely to get the more data you give to the AI with different image-to-image things and more words in the prompt, the more likely you're going to get to a good piece. That doesn't mean that it's impossible to get to a good piece with writing out a prompt. It's going to be very highly unlikely, but you might get there.
Right. Because like if I draw something traditionally and then draw that same thing digitally, you can tell straight away, right, which is which. And similarly, like something drawn by an amateur artist versus a pro, if they try to draw the same thing, there's still a difference there. It would be a pretty obvious difference. So I think that's just where I disagree with your premise, in that there's not enough of a distinction between the two.
I mean, like, if you look at most, like, if you go into, like, the Stable Diffusion or the Mid-Journey Discord or whatever, and you look at the stream of images coming out, most of them are just not very compelling at all. But there are some AI images which are compelling. Do you want to know how the compelling ones were made? With a lot of work. It wasn't type out a prompt, get a final image.
Okay, well, I think that covers everything.
Cool.
So we're at an hour and a half now, actually.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming
So,
on.
all right. Thanks for having me.
For sure. Take care. I'll
All right.
see ya.
Bye.
Alrighty. So, in a moment, we're going to be going over his video, just sort of responding to a few points as they come up. I did ask him before the start if I could do that, just because I normally stream for longer than this, so I need something to pad the time out. But just before that, I'm going to just go to the toilet real quick, and I'm going to open up the section of my video because I saw somebody saying that I'm incorrect, that these image generators are just denoising images. I'm just going to open up the section of my video which proves that they're denoising images. That is how they work. And you guys can watch that whilst I go to the loo. I believe this should have audio. Hope I'll also have to turn off my recording because I've got to send him a recording. Be right back.
Plagiarism. This brings me to the point of discussion, namely, the claim that AI image generators plagiarize the work of artists. To clarify some confusion which leads people to believe this, these AI image generators do not inherently work as collage or composition software, or in the words of the Concept Art Association's Carla Ortiz, that the software breaks down all of the data that was gathered and shreds it apart into little bits of noise, and it starts grabbing little bits of shredded data from all over the place and slowly reintegrates it to pretty much create a new image. So to be abundantly clear, these AI systems do not store the images used for training and blend these images together. All that is stored by such models is the set of weights which define the technique for going from noise to image. In other words, all the model stores is the method used to fill in the blanks, which is exactly what is stored in the brain of a human artist. For a program to operate in the way suggested, where new images are generated by stitching together many previous images, this would require that the entire bank of training data be stored somewhere. In other words, a model like DALL-E or Midjourney would need to store the many terabytes of images that they were trained on, and be able to query this database in real time. This would be reflected in the size of such a model. It would be several hundred terabytes large, rather than a few gigabytes. So, the calls that the model somehow tell artists which images it was referencing to make some new generation are flawed to their core. The AI is not referencing specific images and combining different aspects. It doesn't have any access to its training set. Now, the obvious response to this point, which I will address more fully later, is that of overfitting. Overfitting is a real thing that happens, but it is not at all the expected behavior of such a system, and it also does not demonstrate that the expected output of such a system is in any way a form of photobashing. Like, just from a pure data perspective, all that is stored are the weights of the neural network. Think of these like the parameters in some linear equation. You tweak the parameters until your output is matching.
I think that should be probably sufficient. It's been on for however long that is. Yeah, watch the video. The point is that, no, it's literally just removing noise from images. I believe I covered that fairly early on. Yes, anyway, let's cover some of this video. I'll put it onto, you can get it is linked in the description. I'll put it in the chat again if you want to watch it in full. This is the only response video I've gotten, so on this topic at least. But at least he's willing to respond to the arguments, which is more than can be said of most. Yeah.
In Defense of AI Art by Liquid Zulu contains a few good points, as well as several double standards.
I won't watch his full video. Don't want to pull him out of context, but I mean, we have gone over some of these points at least. We went over IP pretty heavily. Let's go over the plagiarism stuff, because we didn't really delve into that too deeply.
The following question is, can AI art be plagiaristic? Zulu goes on a spiel about noise filters for a while and describes why the way in which an AI learns is essentially the same as how humans learn.
Yeah, so specifically, the way in which it's similar. I'll describe that. The way in which it's similar is that it is filling in the gaps. It is looking at all of these gaps in the images. The image has been destroyed somewhat, and it's trying to fill in those gaps. Now, that is what a human does when they are learning how to paint. They learn how to fill in the gaps. You give them, some amount of blankness, and they try and fill it in. Given a prompt, it's like, I'm trying to draw this sort of picture, and try and fill in the gaps, right?
Zulu goes on to say that sufficient evidence needs to be provided for something to be considered a case of plagiarism. This is true.
Right, and specifically, the way I'm using this is to say that you can't just say AI art as such is plagiarism. You need to link some generated piece of artwork, some generated image, to the image you think it plagiarizes from. You can't just say, well, that image was generated, therefore it's plagiarized from someone. No. You need to make a specific claim. This claim of, this is generated, so it must be stealing from someone somewhere out there. Or even, it must be plagiarizing from someone somewhere out there. That is guilt until proven innocent. That is inverting the correct order of operations here. You're making a positive claim that this thing is plagiarized from something else, so you have to show what it is plagiarized from, and show why it's plagiarism. It's not just, it was generated, therefore plagiarism. And to be clear, with these two examples, these are not text to image. These are image to image. They've taken this input image and got out this image. They've taken this input image and got out this image. Right? This is not typing in a prompt and getting an image out. And people keep trying to present these as if they are that. But they're not.
Simply put, present something like this to a judge, that's a pretty easy case.
So this is a legitimate example. I believe. I can't remember this specific example. I remember this example, but I can't remember actually looking into it. But I do believe that this one is generated text image. Now, that is the point I go over, that yes, there is such a thing as overfitting. Overfitting does happen, and that's a problem that it happens. The AI developers don't want their model to overfit. Nobody does, right? If I searched up Afghan Girl by Steve McCurry, I would get this exact image out. So let's take which Midjourney is not generally overfitted. It doesn't overfit in general. It's an edge case. But even if it did overfit in general, that would mean it's just Google Images. It's just me searching up Afghan Girl by Steve McCurry. And I get back Afghan Girl by Steve McCurry. Right? This doesn't demonstrate what they think it demonstrates. It just doesn't.
Case of plagiarism. But put this in front of a judge, that's going to be harder to prove. Which is why I find all this talk about machine learning to be irrelevant, because all plagiarism boils down to is what things look like in the eyes of humans, and what can be effectively argued.
Yeah, so I think most people go further with the plagiarism claim on this point than he does, where they think that even this is still plagiarism, because it's collaging together previous images in its database. And it's not possible to do that, right? I can download Stable Diffusion XL right now. It'll be like 60 gigabytes. Its training set, many hundreds of terabytes, right? You cannot compress a training set that much and just have it be stitching together parts of the training set. That isn't how it works. It removes noise from the images. It learns how to remove noise by adding noise to the training set and then trying to remove it and seeing how well it did. That's all it does. It removes noise from images. Just burn that phrase into your head, that all these systems do is remove noise from images. All they do.
In court. But if we need to factor machine learning into the legal system, then we can also loosen our definition of plagiarism, seeing as generative AI.
Yeah, Fabio Linguini brings up another point, is that, these people are fine with collaging when you're dealing with paper and pencil, sticking it together. But suddenly they think, no, this is just collaging, so therefore it's evil. It's the same thing. It's the double standard of IP is terrible when it's being used against me, but great when it's being used for me, right? Whoopsie-daisies, it was not intentional. Yeah, we have covered plagiarism. There's a good deal of stuff in here. Over to consent.
I'm skipping a few sections.
I'm not trying to take him out of context here or anything, but it's just, we don't need to replay his whole video. If you want to see the whole video, you can go and watch it. But I just want to be concise.
Here, since I don't care to get into any further debate about machine learning, but Zulu eventually raises the question of whether the training data being used in current AI engines was in fact taken without consent. Large image generators such as Stable Diffusion and Midjourney.
Yes, so the way in which I think it wasn't taken without consent is that if I publish an image online, I am communicating my will to allow people to download that image. Like if I post an image on Twitter, I'm communicating that it's perfectly fine for anybody to look at that image on Twitter. Because what does it mean to look at an image on Twitter? You have to download that image onto your phone so that it can be displayed there. This is a point that I remember him missing in his response. Now, this is quite important for the AI discussion because they say, well, I didn't consent for my data to be used that way. Once you have posted a letter into somebody's house, let's say, you can't say, well, I didn't consent for you to masturbate onto the letter. Tough noggins, right? It's their letter now. They got it from you. You don't have it anymore. Same is true for images. If I post an image online, I can't get, after the fact, pissed off that somebody used that image to train an AI model. That's just untoward. So, sort of the structure of how I structure my consent section is that it goes like, well, okay, was it taken without consent? Some people say that, well, they signed up to the TOS and that grants consent. I think that argument is invalid. Okay, but they have posted it online, so it's not valid for them to say, well, I wanted just humans to see it, but not non-humans, because that makes no sense. You can't do that after the fact. You've already posted it online in public, right? That is the was it taken without consent section. I don't think it was taken without consent. Now, you can go very broad with it to where they just don't like that it was taken, and they say therefore they weren't consenting. Even if you go that broad, the rest of the argument doesn't work for them.
Are primarily trained using Lion, a large bank of URLs.
Stable Diffusion uses Lion, a tenuous acronym for a dataset of almost 6 billion image-text pairs. The clever thing about LAION is that it just has links to the images, so you can't sue them for copyright infringement. Model makers can download the pictures themselves, and then pivot their research project into a business once the model is up and running.
Yeah, so this is the thing that keeps coming up with Zapata and these other guys. Is they're saying that they're laundering data. They're laundering this data by doing it through a non-profit and then making profit on it elsewhere. Based, to be quite frank, yes, good that they were able to get this data and get around these horrible, horrible copyright restrictions, because profit is a good thing, and these people are all a bunch of communists who think otherwise.
As shown, Lion is technically legal, but morally questionable, much in the same way that terms and service agreements and fine print in contracts are considered predatory because they're designed in such a way that deters you from actually reading them, which is why they alone can't always be considered as consent in court. Zulu seems to agree with me on that point. He does point out that publicly put—
Yes, I will clarify that, because I clarify it in one of the footnotes. The reason why I think terms of service is not a legitimate contract, like putting aside any title transfer concerns, I don't think it transfers titles to anything, so it's not a contract. Let's say even if it did, there are 0 people who are reading through the entire terms of service before they click yes. It is understood by everybody involved that terms of service agreements mean, hey, click this button so that you can't sue us for frivolous bullshit in the future. That's what it means, right? So nobody reads it, and you can't agree to something you have not read. It's not possible to agree to something you haven't read. Like, take the example of, I give you a contract, but I put in like tiny little microscopic ink that you also give me $1 million, and then I start suing you for $1 million because you signed it. You didn't read that clause, so you couldn't have possibly agreed to it, right? So it's not a valid clause. You have to read a clause, you have to understand and be communicated a clause before you can accept it. And that's why terms of service agreements are not valid. Or at least they're not contracts. They just are to protect against frivolous lawsuits, which are allowed by the state.
Posting images online communicates that you are allowing anyone to view them. I agree. He then raises what I think is a valid argument from the anti-AI crowd. I may be consenting to other people viewing my work online, but not robots. He claims that this is the same as saying that you only consented to Mongolians viewing your work and not non-Mongolians. Why are we treating bots the same as people?
Yeah, so this is where he misses it. I'm not saying that robots are the same as people. Indeed, they are different. That's why it's an analogy. Right? Analogy means you take A and B, and I explain this in the video. You take A and B. Yes, they have differences, but they're the same in a relevant aspect. Right? So what is the irrelevant? What is the aspect in which they are irrelevantly distinct here? He doesn't do that step. But it is presumably, maybe it is that, well, humans have free will and robots don't. But I mean, like, you know, if I turn my phone over to my dog and show my dog an image you made, have I violated your consent because I showed it something without free will? Like, clearly something wrong here. Like, they need to be precise with their language. This was like the whole idea behind my video, was that the whole debate, people aren't being precise with their language at all. They need to start doing that. They need to actually engage philosophically in this issue. They're not doing that at the moment. So it ends up with just arguments like this, where it's like, well, robots and humans are different. And there are plenty of other arguments like that, where they say that they're different. But it's like, that doesn't demonstrate a disanalogy. You need to demonstrate that it's disanalogous for me to say, I don't want any robots to see this image, to, I don't want any non-Mongolians to see this image. Like, what is the specific disanalogy there? It needs to be shown. And by the way, I just, the reason why I'm going over this video now, I think I mentioned it, is because he was only able to do a short amount of time. I want my streams to be generally longer, as long as they're still entertaining. So he gave me permission to watch over some of this video, to go over some of the points.
You see what I mean? He can't make up his mind between human and machine, despite the two of them being fundamentally different concepts. In any case, Zulu and I already agree that terms and service contracts are legally flimsy, meaning the argument that simply using an online platform communicates...
Yeah, so this is where he misses it really big. I'm making two different claims there. I'm not making the claim that posting it publicly communicates consent to view it because some terms of service. No, it's not because of the terms of service. It's because you posted it publicly. That action in itself communicates consent for people to download it. Right? That is what does it.
Explicit consent is not bulletproof. And I'll add that just because something is public doesn't mean you can do whatever you want within it. It may be difficult for the pro-AI crowd to understand this, since, judging from the tone of this video, a lot of them are devoid of empathy, but an artist's body of work tends to be very intertwined with their identity, or in lamer legal terms, their brand. It's legal to take someone's photo without consent if they're in a public space, but keep taking photos of them and that can be considered harassment.
Right, can be considered. This is the positivism here, which, you know, I don't think there's a single other natural law theorist who is big on this issue. Who cares that it can be considered? Can be considered by whom? Are they correct? Who knows, right? It can be considered harassment. I do not accept that as a legal argument in any case. I don't care that it can be considered harassment to keep taking a picture of an individual person. Keep taking a picture of this gentleman here. Don't really give a shit about that. And you're not initiating any conflicts with him. So it's not a crime. You need some objective standard for what counts as a crime. So I have mentioned this phrase a few times, initiating conflicts, aggression, right? My stance on law is that the only crime is to violate the non-aggression principle, where an aggression means you initiate a conflict. So it's like, because I believe, judging by the chat, there's some people here who aren't familiar with my content normally. So, to commit an aggression is like if Crusoe and Friday are on the island, Crusoe picks up a stick and he wants to use it to spearfish, and then Friday comes along and tries to take that same stick to stoke his fire. They can't do both those actions at the same time. They are mutually exclusive, i.e., we have a conflict over the use of the stick. So, it is Friday who has initiated aggression. Has initiated this conflict. So Friday has committed aggression. So Friday is the criminal. That is the only law that I accept. And you can find my course on this in detail for free on my website. And just check out these testimonials. This guy's a well-respected lawyer, well-respected libertarian theorist. He's loving it. He has promoted this course before. So, 1.68 million subscribers. People are loving it. So, you can get it for free. Yes. That's not a bait, that's converting the dude to ANCAP. Well, hopefully.
If a photo is meant for commercial use, then you need to either blur out everyone's face or have them sign a consent form. If you decide to spray paint the side of a public building and take a photo of it, you've now committed vandalism.
Right, not because you've taken the photo, though. That's where the distinction is. When you spray painted the building, that was the crime, because you've initiated conflict over the use of this wall, right? The wall can't be clean and dirtied with paint at the same time. That was the crime. Photographing it doesn't matter. It's not even involved.
This comes down to intent, a part of fair use, which I'll be...
No. It's nothing to do with intent. And he does talk about fair use later. I did ask my lawyer friend about this. I don't know if he's okay with me sharing who he is, so I'll just keep him on for now. But I asked him about this, and he said that this entire section of the video is basically bullshit. Like, it is a violation of intellectual property because you're making derivative works, and fair use doesn't apply here. It has nothing to do with, well, I was intending to do something good, I was intending to do this, I was intending to do that. Does not matter for law. Even the positive law. The positive law doesn't give a shit that you were just intending to do some cute fan art. It does not give a shit about that.
Explaining in more detail near the end. Zulu then presents the question, is it immoral to train an AI on data acquired without consent? And claims that raising such a question amounts to pissiness, which I'll be coming...
Okay, so no, specifically, I use the phrase pissiness to say that, well, let's take into account that they have this ex post revocation of consent and pissiness over the use of their art. Right, that is the pissiness. They're literally getting pissed over it. They're pissed off because after the fact, after they've already posted it and been fine with everybody, they learned that somebody used it for a computer program. Right? That is the pissiness. And I think it is dreadfully not immoral to train a data on AI acquired without consent, if that's what consent means. What distro do I use? I use NixOS. Do I have NeoFetch? Yeah, I've got NeoFetch. There you go.
Coming back to shortly. This would be a good place to mention that, like most advancements in society, the foundations of generative AI are built on what might as well be slave labor.
Workers were earning...
Yeah, so this is a particularly offensive part of the video. I'm just going to let this play full, and then I'm just going to talk about it for a second.
The foundations of generative AI are built on what might as well be slave labor.
Workers were earning a median $2 per hour in 20...
So, it's built on what might as well be slave labor. It hard cuts to a clip of talking about Amazon Mechanical Turk workers earning $2 an hour. The reason why I find this so deeply offensive is it's this attitude that the third worlders who are trying to get a good job, who are trying to improve themselves, and who've been given this opportunity by Amazon and are getting paid more than they get paid anywhere else, by the fact that they have agreed to this job, they have demonstrated that they think it's better than anywhere else, that no, that's too low. That work is too low. We need to remove this work. What do you think happens when you remove that work? They're back to fucking subsistence farming. Like, I don't think people understand just how poor these people are. The sweatshop is far better for them than the alternative. By the fact that they have chosen the sweatshop. It's just this idea that choosing to work somewhere for a better wage than anywhere else, that might as well be slavery. It not only is it degrading the work that is being done by these people, it's also raising the status of slavery. Now, well, slavery, I guess, isn't that bad. Because, you can choose to go there or not, and you're getting paid for it. No, slavery is horrible. That's why I really hate these types of comparisons made by people. Where they see a sweatshop, they see people working in worse conditions than them, who are making way less money than them, and they're thinking, boy, we gotta stop this. And if they stop it, it will lead to the deaths of many millions of people and really stagnate these countries. I think that's horrible. The sweatshop is a great innovation. It's actually raising these people's standards of living. It is. Because one of the worst things about the poor countries is how many people are choosing to be choosing poverty. They're choosing to be poor. Getting rid of a sweatshop aggressively, that's forcing them to be poor. That is really horrible. Like the few people who've chosen to rise above it, chosen wealth instead of poverty. And you're going to say, well, that's slave labor, we got to get rid of that. Like, disgusting. That is disgusting to me.
2018, and the situation hasn't really changed in the years following. These people are invisible, poor, and very easy to exploit. Mechanical Turk is slavery as a service, but it was also the first of a new breed. Turkers are generalists, but the AI revolution needed specialists. Appen is one of many companies from Kenya refugees. Work tasks as they
Important to think of data in the case of training sets as crowdsourced labor. Whether it's photos, paragraphs in an article, or questionable furry art, labor went into producing those things.
Right, so yeah, I would agree. Labor went into producing it, and I necessarily know. I mean, here is the syllogism as it ends up. This was Solar Sand's syllogism, where I had to add in a potential snuck premise that he was having there, because it just didn't follow otherwise. I showed, indeed, it's not unethical to train AI on data whose progenitors have not given permission and been compensated. Let's think about the alternative here. Let's think about, you can't do anything with data when you haven't compensated the progenitor of that data. Well, the idea to give compensation is a form of data. Data just means information, right? So that idea, you're not allowed to use the idea to ask for permission and compensate people until you first ask the permission and compensate the person who came up with that idea. But whoops, we've entered an infinite regress. You can't use that idea until you use that idea, but you can't use that idea until you use this idea, but you can't use this idea, so on and so forth. You're just going to go back forever. So everybody dies under this premise. This premise is everybody should die. Horrible. These people, they don't think through their ethics properly. And that is why I made this video. Because the video that I made. And that's why I made this video. Previously in the sort of AI art discussion, almost in every instance, there might have been a few counterexamples here and there, but in almost every instance, it was just blind reactions to the arguments that were coming out from the anti-AI side. Until this video was released, nobody really dug deep into the premises underlying the anti-AI arguments and challenged those premises. That's what I did with this video. I went in and I looked at, I integrated through with the ethics, I integrated with the economics, I integrated with how the technology actually works across the board. And I challenged their premises. I didn't just accept that, yeah, it's horrible that people lose their jobs. I said, well, why is that horrible? Why is it horrible that people are going to lose their jobs? I think that's fucking fantastic. And you guys think that's fucking fantastic when it's for other jobs, not your own job. Right? This is the first place to actually attack these premises. And, you know, apply philosophy to it. Because these people, they just... I have this whole section in the video where they rush towards aesthetic objectivism. They didn't actually have a proper philosophy before doing this. They just quickly saw this new technology and had to run towards whatever philosophy would get rid of it. But they haven't actually thought through what the implications of that philosophy are. They have nothing. Nothing. And that's, it's, you could put me in a debate with any of the top channels on this topic, and I would crush them on this point. I believe I've demonstrated that by performing very well in the debate I just had with Mr. Blearoyd. Right? Not to say that I think this guy's, you know, be harassed or anything. I think it's great that he gave a response video. I think it's great that he agreed to debate me. I just think that others should be willing to debate this topic. And anybody else who is pro-AI should really look hard at my video and start integrating those arguments, because it completely flips the script on them. Yeah, we could go over... We didn't go over entitlement too much in the debate.
Who eventually uses the iceberg analogy to illustrate the entitlement of...
Yeah, so specifically this analogy was used talking about Bastiat's the seen and the unseen. So the seen, what they want you to look at, what they care about, is that artists get more money. But there's a cost involved in that. Namely, that the money can't be spent elsewhere. So where it's the broken window analogy. So some kid comes along and he throws a rock through a window of a baker shop. And then the baker's got to pay to have it repaved, right? He's got to repaint. He's got to get a new window in there, right? Clean it up and all that. So the Keynesian come along and say, well, this is stimulating the economy by breaking this window. Because before, the window guy didn't have a job, and now he does have a job. So it's actually good to break windows. This is quite at odds with what you would expect, because it's destroying property. It's destroying wealth, literally, in front of you. So what the Keynesian is doing is he's focusing only on the seen, that you got a new job created, but not the unseen, that now the baker can't spend that money anywhere else. Henry Hazlitt has a book on this. Economics in One Lesson, where it's all about the seen and the unseen, and applying it to different situations. Because it is just... It's not... Oh, dear me. I'm getting a alarm there. You can't just focus on the window maker getting a job. You have to focus on what the consequences of that are. It's the same for artists getting protected. The consequence is many, many things. Suddenly we don't get to utilize AI fully. Like, I think people don't really get how important AI is. They forget how incredible it is that I can just go onto my computer right now, ask it a question, and it'll talk back to me like a human. 5, 10 years ago, it would have been thought impossible to do that. Like, this is a really huge innovation. And they want to destroy it so that people can make anime pictures still. And they don't get outcompeted. Like, that's horrible.
Artists, which I find very interesting, since I can use the same analogy to explain why he hates them so much. The top of the iceberg represents artists with relatively large platforms, such as Sam Does Arts, Carlo Ortiz, Adam Duff, etc. The 1% or so of artists who, through a combination of hard work and lucky circumstances, are actually able to make a living off their art.
You know, there is one soundbite I just wanted to show on the stream here.
So to reiterate, what are the benefits of AI and why do they justify the cost? This section really highlights how Zulu's video is all about objective fact.
Thank you, I agree. This section does highlight how my video is all about objective fact. I'm bringing that to the forefront here. That is what I'm doing here. Against these alternatives you might go to.
Zulu eventually uses the iceberg analogy to illustrate the entitlement of artists, which I find very interesting, since I can use the same analogy to explain why he hates them so much. The top of the iceberg represents artists with relatively large platforms, such as Sam Does Arts, Carlo Ortiz, Adam Duff, etc. The 1% or so of artists who, through a combination of hard work and lucky circumstances, are actually able to make a living off their art.
Yes, and she gets pissed off about competition. Don't recognize that face, but maybe he does. Can't remember who that is. These two getting pissed off by competition, etc. They're all getting pissed off by competition. I show this on my video. This one, Carla Ortiz, she wants to make a central planning bureau which will come along and say, company, you're allowed to have this much AI and you're allowed to use it in these ways. And here's the composition of your workforce. And that is just dreadful. Want to know why? I have a video about that called Why Socialism is Literally Impossible. Economic calculation problem. If you've got a central planning bureau, you cannot economize. You literally do not have an economy. So yeah, I'm definitely looking at those people, and they're doing that thing.
The bottom of the iceberg represents the many current artists who, for various reasons, are not able to significantly profit off their work, despite some of them being very...
Boo-hoo, don't give a shit, right? If they can't profit, skill issue, right? And that might sound callous of me, but I'm getting said this shit to me countless places. Everybody's telling me that I've got to care about these people, and that if I don't care about these people, I should be fucking shot in the head. That's callous. That's callous. The repeated claims that, wow, we need regulation. We need regulation for this. Regulation, regulation, regulation. He keeps saying this. That's callous. That's lacking empathy. Because he's advocating, he doesn't realize it, but he's advocating that I get shot in the fucking head. That is callous. Not me saying that I don't fucking owe these artists anything. I don't owe any of these artists anything. They gotta earn it.
very skilled at what they do. This is called survivorship bias. Art is hard and takes a lot of time, but now we can compete with you elitist artists by using...
That's not the popular artist saying that. Like, this is what I don't get about his attempt to use this analogy. Oh, sorry. Never mind. I misunderstood what he's saying. He's saying that I am saying this to these different groups.
Shit bias. Art is hard and takes a lot of time, but now we can compete with you elitist artists by using AI. Art isn't beneficial to society. You should have gotten a real job like
Yeah, so I never say this anywhere. I think art is massively important to society. I think it's great that people make art. Go ahead. If you want to make fucking art, go ahead. I'm rooting for you. I am a big believer in art as an actual requirement for man's conceptual faculty. And I have the argument for that. Most of these artists, they don't have the argument for that.
bricklaying. You're trying to monopolize styles and ideas.
True, they are.
Your failed business model is not my problem.
True again, and that's not in contradiction. Your failed business model isn't my problem. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't try and make art. It just means that don't come over to me and put a fucking bullet in my head because you weren't able to succeed. That's what that means. Don't put a fucking bullet in my head.
The fact that most artists in society are invisible is why the question, is it immoral to train AI on data acquired without consent, does not amount to pissiness at all, because again, training data is just crowdsourced labor. Zulu then makes the wild suggestion that artists would prefer that they get paid rather than AI being used to cure Alzheimer's.
Yeah, so this is literally the practical implication of these anti-AI claims. They want this central planning bureau to come along and decide in which circumstances AI can be used, how much you can use, how you're allowed to use it. They want the central planning bureau to come about. Practically speaking, that means less life-saving technologies. One thing he does ask in this video is for me to cite any big medical contributions that AI makes. Here's CNN. AI-supported mammogram screening increased breast cancer detection rate by 20%. The Harvard Gazette. New AI tool can diagnose cancer, guide treatment, predict patient survival. Kian et Lee et al. Chanley, I don't know. Early prediction of Alzheimer's disease and related dementias using real-world electronic health records. This is what they want to rob you of. This, along with many other things, they want to rob you of. Literally rob you of. Because they'll put a fucking bullet in your head if you go ahead and try to cure fucking Alzheimer's. That's what they advocate. They don't realize it. It's hidden under many, many layers of evasion. But that is practically what they're advocating. That somebody trying to cure Alzheimer's gets a fucking bullet in his head so that they can draw anime pictures. Right? Like, that's the long and short of it.
As far as I'm aware, no artist has ever said this. He just made it up in his head. At least my disdain towards tech companies comes from past instances of fraud, negligence, slave labor. Cases of artists attempting to monopolize styles are few and far between, and is—
No, it's not. Not few and far between. It's every fucking single one of them. Not every one of them. I shouldn't be too broad with that. I take that back. Because, in fact, Chronic was in the chat earlier, and he contributed art to my video. I offered to pay him. He was fine with not getting paid. Right? But it is the broad majority of this anti-AI crowd. They're the ones I'm angry at. They want to monopolize art. That is what they're advocating. They're advocating that the government comes in and says, this art style, it's not good. We don't want it. Don't use it. That is what they're advocating. They want the government to tell you what art tools you're allowed to use. Many of them don't realize it. I think some of them do. And that is really evil.
Is already something that's frowned upon within the community. What Zulu is essentially arguing here is that artists wanting to be paid despite their flawed business models can be considered entitlement. But
yes. But my unregulated usage of crowdsourced labor of millions of people is not. Yes, indeed. That's not entitlement. I am not entitled here. I'm paying for it. I don't pay for it. I don't use AI tools. But if I did, I'd pay for them. I'd pay for the server space. I'd pay for it. If I wanted to use Mechanical Turk, I'd have to pay them. I don't think I'm entitled to it. Right? They do think they're entitled to keep their jobs. I don't.
his unregulated usage of the crowdsourced labor of literally millions of people is not, somehow. Sounds like a double standard to me.
What's not?
I'll note here that artists don't care as much about the compensation part. We don't do art solely for money.
Yeah, so that's bullshit, I think. as I think I have demonstrated with these quotes. They do care about the compensation. That's what they care about. I think, yeah, here.
I would love to see more art being made in the world. I want to teach people things. Artists get enjoyment out of collaborating with and supporting each other.
Apparently not, right? Apparently they don't get enjoyment out of that. Because, you know, I've got a long enough memory to remember when this thing called NFTs started kicking off. And all of art Twitter, they started kicking off about anybody who wanted to monetize their work with NFTs. They started bullying these people off the internet. Another unique Nemosaurus video. They didn't even care she went missing. 7 hours long. I'll send the shorter one because it's more likely to be actually opened up in your tabs. Send that into the chat. They don't want to stick together. This happened right before the AI stuff. And then they all just turn tail and go, whoa, we just want to stick together. We're just being all friendly. That's why I keep bringing up that they want to shoot you in the fucking head. Because they don't get to play this double standard of, oh, I'm just an innocent artist. I just want to make my art. I'm not trying to do anything bad here. You know, meanwhile, just before all this shit, they weren't sticking together. They were bullying people. That's why I brought up the bullying thing. That's why I have a whole section of my video about bullying different people. They're not looking to stick together against just these meanie pies. They're the fucking meanie pies. And they don't have to have this fucking double standard of, I'm not accusing blearoyd of this, to be clear. I'm accusing the broad majority of the anti-AI people of this. They want to crush these people. More than that, they want the government to go in there and shoot these people in the fucking head. If they don't kowtow and go along with the program. They don't get to play this, oh, I'm just a poor innocent artist thing after that. No, fuck off. It's not going to work with me.
Zulu backs up this claim by cherry-picking 3 different quotes, which...
You're cherry-picking. Literally, this guy is like some big fucking... I can't remember what his position is, but he's like a big deal in the art communities and some like foundation or whatever. This one's Fena. He's a big art YouTuber. This one's Duchess Celestia, big art YouTuber. They're all worried about it because it's just too easy. It's too easy to make AI art. That's why they're all concerned about it. Because it's too easy. What separates the wheat from the chaff, it's got a low bar to entry. If they can't make it, they shouldn't be able to make it. Right? That is what concerns them. Not, oh, well, it actually violates copyright. Because none of these people care about copyright in any other situation. So dishonest.
do sound pretentious on the surface, but as someone who is a part of the art community, I recognize this attitude doesn't come from artists not wanting other people to create things. It comes from the existential fear that AI creates and a disappointment that...
Yeah, so it's not just that other people want to create things. It's that they're doing so in a way that can outcompete with them. They're fine if you use it just in the lab, like Istabrak says. It's when it becomes competition for them. That's when they become against it.
People are choosing to rely on image generators rather than learning the skills of art making from them. I would never claim to be as capable.
Right. They're pissed off because people are using AI image generators rather than learning the art skills from them. They don't get a cut. I completely agree.
Image generators rather than learning the skills of art making from them. I would never claim to be as capable as a professional plumber simply because I'm capable of using a plunger.
See, okay, we'll go. No protectionism.
Section is supposed to be about Marxism, but mostly consists of unhinged ranting, so I'm just
Yeah, so it's not unhinged ranting. It is about Marxism, and that is the root of their philosophy. And most of them don't realize it because they haven't studied philosophy for a second, but that's the root of it.
just going to hone in on some specific points. Zulu brings up a quote from Duchess Celestia, who says that image generators would still...
Yeah, so this is the big one. Well, if it let's imagine it was trained ethically sourced materials, would it be fine then? No, in my opinion, it would not. Not because of the software itself, but because of how humans would still be most inclined to use it as a replacement for real art or artists and real art. Now, to be clear, blearoyd, he disagrees with Duchess Celestia on this. This is not an uncommon sentiment. I'm telling you, this is, after watching all of this bullshit, this is not an uncommon sentiment that, well, the problem is that they're just going to use it to replace artists. And that's my concern here. Sure, and this is proven, because if we look at this, Austin McConnell got a huge fucking backlash because he used an open source model, sorry, not open source, public domain model, a model that was trained only on public domain art. He did all the work, he did everything, and these people got fucking pissed off at him for it. There's one channel, he's got multiple videos on this guy. Multiple videos shouting at Austin McConnell for using a public domain AI generator. The exact thing these people have been asking for. They will still bully you for using it. So no, these are all just bullshit smoke screens. They don't give a shit about the source of the material. They don't give a shit about that. All they care about is that they are under threat. Their jobs, their livelihoods are under threat. That's what they care about.
be a problem even if they were trained on ethically sourced materials. And I will push back on this mindset. In my own opinion, AI models would be fine if they were trained ethically. If people still want to use generative AI to make things, that's their choice. Though I doubt that ethical models would have nearly as much appeal, seeing as a lot of AI images look like they were lifted directly from ArtStation. The biggest problem I have with current models is that they not only impinge on creative markets, but are also using artists' own skill sets against them.
Not only impinge on creative markets, so that is the point that Duchess Celestia was making, that they impinge on creative markets, i.e. they take jobs from artists. But also, what was the other thing he said?
Models is that they not only impinge on creative markets, but are also using artists' own skill sets against them.
Using artist skill sets against them, so learning from those artists, like every human artist ever. I'll address this point.
Are limitless. Zulu also states that, quote, the restricted policies being advocated by people in the name of artists are not a universal benefit. Rather, these policies, like all protectionism, benefit the least effective producers of art at the expense of everyone else.
Yeah, so I'll justify this claim. So if you've got some sort of protectionism, let's say it's tariffs, right? Tariffs are big in the news right now because Trump wants a bunch of them. They did implement tariffs before, where there was a bunch of cheap Japanese cars and products and stuff like that. And American consumers were choosing those over the American-made ones. So the US started implementing tariffs. What you're doing is you're punishing both the US consumers, making them have a lower standard of living, and punishing the best consumer producers of those products because they're the best. Because they're better than the US producers, they're getting punished. So it is punishing the best in favor of the worst. That is what protectionism does in general. In general, protectionism does this.
Now, I'm not well read on protectionism, but I don't know if you've noticed, content farms have been getting even worse here on YouTube and other platforms.
Yeah, so he starts going on about like slop factories. I do have in my video.
Output is matching what you would expect.
Shut up. A section on the whining papers and what makes them possible. This is all about slop factories and why I hate them. So I think we can move on from there. We should maybe do the Luddism part.
Here Zulu brings up another valid point. Is it not hypocritical to say you're only against certain forms of AI while using other AI tools? In my first video, I brought up an example of me using a free AI filter to convert a photo into a manga-style background. Now, does this come with ethical concerns? If we pretend that the photo I'm using here is a stock photo, then that would remove that part from the equation.
No, it doesn't, actually. To be clear, because the ethical concerns being brought up by the anti-AI crowd is that maybe I'm misinterpreting him here. He might clarify this in a second, but the ethical concern being brought up is that it is stealing manga artists' art, plagiarizing their art, to apply the filter from here onto here. That is the problematic part.
But then what about the filter? I'm going to assume
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
that, like every other AI tool, it was trained on strict images. But don't most manga artists already trace and use filters and 3D models?
Right, it doesn't matter whether they trace and use 3D models, because that's all talking about this, how you got the source image. The problem they see is going from source to output. It's that process that they're concerned about.
For their backgrounds to keep up with deadlines? Is manga-style background too generic to even be copyrightable?
And this is again, he's using copyrightable as a legal claim, but he's fine with fan art. So that is the problem here. Now, we'll go on. I mean, I think we did cover this basically, actually. Yeah, he says something very wrong in the opportunity cost section.
Near the end of this section, Zulu suggests that AI could somehow do away with opportunity cost.
Yeah, no, I never said that. I never said it could do away with opportunity cost. I said that it could lower the opportunity cost of doing art. Meaning that, for instance, Shadiversity can still do art whilst raising a family, whilst running a successful YouTube channel, whilst doing all these other things, because it lowers the opportunity cost of making art. That's a brilliant thing. It doesn't get rid of opportunity cost. I'm not saying that gets rid of scarcity. Right? There's still scarcity. There's still opportunity cost. But it lowers that opportunity cost.
Which is the pinnacle of entitlement to me. No one person can be good at everything, no matter how advanced AI gets. All of my interests are solitary in nature, which means I don't have a social life. I don't have what it takes to compete in the Olympics, but you don't hear me complaining about that. Pursuing one option will always mean sacrificing other options. Deal with it. To put my own spin on Zulu's words here, your opportunity...
Yeah, your opportunity cost is not my problem. So, the disanalogy here in, he's parodying my claim that your failed business model is not my problem. The difference is that I'm not coming out here and saying we should violently use force against people so that I can lower my opportunity cost. He is saying that we should violently use force against people to save my business model. That is the difference. That is what I'm getting pissed off at. He's not just live and let live. Just opportunity costs will be what they be. Let's just go with the flow here, man. He's saying bring in the fucking government to crush these people and shoot them in the fucking head. That's what he's telling us. That's what he wants. Here, we've got bullying section.
Okay, almost at the end here. Zulu talks about the bullying of people for being pro-AI, because yes, a lot of artists demonize AI tools and feel strongly about them, because why wouldn't they, given everything that AI entails? And I agree that Austin McConnell, who I bring up in my first video, made ethical considerations as to how he was using said tools and that he had valid reasons for doing so. And I agree that he was treated unfairly by his audience. This is unrelated, but I learned not long after making that video that he actually suffered a stroke during surgery, and I'm hoping he bounces back from it. Zulu also brings up Shadiversity being unfairly targeted for teaching others how to use image generation.
I do want to comment on this specific image. So this was a challenge posted by Shadiversity for the anti-AI idiots. He was like, hey, reproduce this image with just a prompt. Not a single person was able to do it. And there were a bunch of people were saying, hey, she's got a broken wrist there. Therefore, you're stupid. And then he just recreated the pose. Look, you can do that. This is an actual pose that you can do. It's an actual historical pose. So I think it's important context here.
Raiders.
And he had to do a bunch of image-to-image bullshit to get this working. You can't do it with a single prompt. Pardon me.
But a little detail he fails to mention is that Shad's own brother is none other than Jazza, a
Yeah, so I'm aware of this. I don't see why you have to mention this. Like, why does it matter that Jazza is Shadiversity's brother? He goes on to explain, like, well, Shad could just learn it from Jazza, but that doesn't address the opportunity cost point. Shadiversity, if he chooses to be an artist, full-time artist, he can't do other things. He can't run a full-time medieval channel and raise a family and be building a fucking castle, because he's building a fucking castle, this guy, all whilst learning how to become a competent artist. Jazza, his job is to be an artist. He spec'd into that. I'm sure that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fucking fine. And Shadiversity is perfectly fine with that. They're on good terms, as far as I'm aware. It's just not relevant to my video. It doesn't matter that, well, Jazza's brothers with Shadiversity. Like, who cares?
prominent artist here on YouTube. And I'm not the first person to point out how tragic it is that Shad feels the
Exactly, Rincon Mori. Jazz doesn't hate his brother as much as the anti-AI people want to believe it. Exactly, like, they have collaboration videos. They have collaborated 11 months ago. No, that's sorry, that's actual Jake. So, ooh, they must hate each other. No, they've got videos they've done together. We can find one. We gotta find one. Oh, there we go. Can I teach a mega noob how to fight sword fight? Look who that is. Right, they're brothers. I don't think there's ever been any evidence that they're pissed off with each other over this politics, right? I don't know what Jazz's opinion on AI art is, but they're not at each other's throats about it, as far as I can tell.
the need to rely on AI rather than simply learning from or even collaborating with his own through AI, he's losing in the personalized appeal and cohesion of his traditional and digital art, which is not a very good trade-off. Zulu talks about Corridor Digital, who I bring up.
Yeah, so the Corridor Digital example is particularly interesting to me. So this is a visual effects channel where their entire channel, apart from like VFX Artists React, is basically, let's experiment with this new VFX technique. Great channel, by the way. Let's just look at what they've done recently. It's all, let's experiment with this VFX technique, let's experiment with this yada 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 yada. It's all just experimenting with VFX techniques, and people were getting pissed off that they were experimenting with a VFX technique. Like, this is not taking jobs from anyone. And look, this video, it is, people were saying, when this video first came out, oh my god, I bet they're a VFX channel. Mother's Basement said this. Oh my god, they're a VFX channel. Of course they don't care that artists are losing their jobs. This video was based on a technique which is taking away 3D modeling. How much 3D modeling do you think they do? So much. Right? They don't care. They want to experiment with that technique as well. they're not protectionists. They're innovators. Like, these people are just, they haven't actually cared about or seen, or they're lying about, Corridor Digital.
Up in my counterpoints video, and in that video I do refer to Corridor as being dishonest and or out of touch for being pro-AI, and you know what, I'll revoke that part since they are a VFX channel and can't really be blamed for experimenting with a technology they didn't create to begin with. I do still think their follow-up video was very tone-deaf.
So, this is something I can speak on here. I was talking to my friend the other day about the language of YouTube titles. It's not written in English. It's written in Titleese. They've got to make the most clickable thumbnail, the most clickable title possible. They, of course, recognize in this video the drawbacks of the technology. But what is the video about? It's about this brand new, massive innovation in animation, where you can animate off of live action footage. That's a massive innovation. If they just said, whoa, big innovation in animation, 100,000 views, right? Like, nobody's clicking on that apart from their core audience. But did we just change animation forever? Whoa. What is this big change in animation? It's this brand new innovation. They're giving you more information than a literal description of the video, which is, we used AI filters to make people into anime. The literal description gives you less information than the clickbait title. This is the proper place of clickbait. It's a good thing that they clickbaited. It's not a bad thing.
With all of that said, I've received a few negative comments on my anti-AI videos, and honestly, I was hesitant to even make this one because I'm concerned about my artwork being targeted by pro-AI weirdos simply because they want to taunt me. But I went ahead anyways. Zulu does acknowledge the fact that bullying goes both ways near the end of this section, but at that point, what are you really trying to argue?
So, what I'm really trying to argue is that the artists don't get to have this fucking moral high ground that they're just above it all. They're just living and letting live. And then these people came in and took all their artwork. No, they don't get to have that. They don't get to have this fucking high ground. Right? And I had to acknowledge, because otherwise it'd be like, well, it goes both ways. If I didn't acknowledge that. Right? And I say in the video explicitly, I don't really give a shit if you're going around bullying people on the internet. Who cares? Right? It's the internet. It's not real life. What I care about is that they're simultaneously bullying people and claiming to have this moral high ground. No, you don't get to do that.
If you're trying to say that we should all be a little more understanding of each other's perspectives, then I agree. That's why I'm making this video. Also, during this clip between two artists, one of them mentions that being able to produce more work with fewer employees could make indie studios a lot more.
I think we're basically on there. Should we go over the fan art fair use section? I mean, I'll really again that his big thing here is that, whoa, there's actually this thing called fair use. This is sort of a YouTuber interpretation of fair use. What I mean by that is, like, you know, YouTubers will say, this is actually a fair use video. You know, I consulted with a lawyer earlier today about fair use. He wasn't giving me legal advice, to be clear. He's just a friend of mine. He told me, depends. I asked him, is fan art generally infringing on IP? Or is it fair use, right? Depends. Fan art is a derivative work, and the presumption is that it violates IP, and fair use is the defense, not an exception. The argument can be made if it is not being done for any commercial reason. That said, certainly commissioned or otherwise income-generating fan art is a violation of IP. Hell, it's technically a violation of Warner Bros. IP when a comic book artist at Comic-Con does a sketch of, say, Batman for $5 a piece. The only reason it's allowed to continue is because the owners of the characters aren't the assholes they could legally be. So if you're going to be against IP infringements and you're going to use IP arguments in terms of against AI art, be against fan art as well. That's all I want. Just be consistent, right? And then we can start having a real conversation. It's the inconsistency that makes this fucking impossible. I think we went over IP sufficiently already. Yeah, I think that's about as much as I had to say. Thank you everyone for coming along. That was a great stream. Find it there. Boop.